definitely a crazy year. I mean, I used to sit around waiting on one release, and now I'm wondering why the hell we're putting out five. So
I
it's
love it.
been really good.
I love it. Well, before we jump into why you're releasing five projects this year, what song or album or artist have you really had on repeat this year? I feel like, we're in April, but country music's already put out so much this year, or just music in general. Who have
Yeah.
you really been loving this year?
Um, I'm honestly an older record that I have not turned off yet. Keith Gaddis' Big City Blues is a record that I've listened to for many years now, but I for some reason keep going back to it, and I think because it's great. I loved Keith. I had the honor to write a couple songs with Keith through the time of knowing him, and I just that record to me is just spotless. And there's something about the angst and the priority of the angst in that record, and just the kind of room for mistakes and room for people maybe being on different pages and just all being themselves making a record. Kind of made the record all on one page. So I love that record.
I love it. I will need to add that to my listen to list for the day here. Expand my horizons a little bit. But I feel like this year, end of last year, or, obviously into this year, you've talked a lot about this kind of being a personal comeback for you. You took some time focused on yourself, but I feel like this is also a really big musical comeback for you. So why five EPs? What was that conversation like with yourself and, with your collaborators?
It really kind of sparred from my manager. To be honest, Nick Hartley reached out to me and said, "Look, you've made so many projects, and what he called great projects. I just call them projects." But he was so adamant that the world needed to hear, the versatility of things that I can do, and which either go from being right down the middle, or if it's something that's a little left to center, and so I joke around, but it's honestly the truth. I've got a little red Craftsman toolbox full of hard drives, and on those hard drives I call them five EPs, but most of them are full length records, really. And we just chose 4 to 5 songs, whatever, 5 to 6 songs per project. And I started recording these, I believe, back in like 2017, and I cut basically 1 to 2 records a year, and nobody ever heard them. And I haven't like gone back and redone a bunch of parts or redone vocals. It's all what it was then. And for some reason, a lot of it feels more current than it did when I cut them. And so I just it was a crazy ordeal to go through these hard drives and listen to all this stuff and go, my God, I haven't listened to these in years. And but I'm glad I did, because I do think that it exposes the world to a different side of me as a musician per EP. So
I love it. So Ashland City, am I assuming this is Ashland
yeah.
City, Tennessee?
Yes,
Or another
yes.
Ashland City somewhere on the globe
I,
that we recorded
I
this?
I haven't checked that, but it is Ashland City, Tennessee. I was living there for a couple of years, and we had a house that I had gone through a couple different studio renditions there, but one of them was cut in our big bonus room that I had a studio out of for a while, and then and so yeah, it's I cut that one last year at some point in time. I can't quite remember, but I think it's like last winter. Just cutting demos, and really demos turned out to be records.
Love it. So why is this like kind of this second piece in the series? I'm a big book nerd. I love series.
Yeah.
So I kind of approach this as like a series for you. So why was this kind of a perfect kind of follow up to what you gave us end of last year?
Because to me, the first one was the most recent. Somerville obviously was like kind of the most recent work. And then I've kind of just been following that line, like kind of just going backwards. but going backwards because, to be honest, to me, the music gets a little more in depth the further we go. Like, if I listen to Somerville, or I was to pull it up in here on my makeshift studio. I've been outside building a studio for the last 2 weeks. So here we go, another record in another place. But anyways, so so the first one was like very bare bones. It was like a drum loop and a drum machine, or me playing drums and bass guitar. And that was really the guts of that record. Ashland City was some friends, that would come out and be hanging out at night, or we'd make dinner or something, and I'd have them up and play on something. And then as we keep going down that line, I feel like the depth, and it just keeps really getting deeper.
I'm excited. So, you mentioned that it just kind of keeps getting a little bit deeper, but how do you feel like, this EP challenged you as both a songwriter and just, challenging your creativity a little bit? Because you are putting out 5.
Yeah. Well, I had just come back from Texas. My longtime publishing deal that I had with the Orbison family, who are still great friends of mine, and I love them dearly. It wasn't, we didn't end on bad terms or anything. It was just my time there was done. And I had moved back to town with really no publishing deal lined up. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew I needed to come back from Texas because, it was an 18-hour drive, or, a long day of flying. So we moved back, and it was a challenge for the fact that I hadn't been in Nashville in a while. I didn't really want to write the Nashville, thing that I had done for a long time. And so it was trying to find like new ground a little bit. And I think there's only one song on that record that I wrote right before I left Nashville, with Casey Beathard and Ryan Tyndall. We wrote a song called Never Got Around to That, that's on that project. And so I feel like it was just a challenge trying to refigure who was I as a songwriter, and where did I kind of want to fit, because I feel like nowadays it's like you're trying to stick a really big square peg in a round hole. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but it was challenging for that reason, and second was challenging because it was my first time like really engineering things. I mean, I had done some, but really like tracking everything myself, and really just like not having another producer, not having another ear on it, being really quiet about it, not playing it for other people. So it was kind of a challenge on a lot of different levels, but really just trying to figure like, who am I now? I'm in a town that I don't know if I love. I'm just trying to kind of rezone, and like, who's Chase Bryant now as an adult and not a kid in tight pants and singing top 40 radio.
Yeah, I'm sure Nashville changed. I mean, I feel like it changes every time I'm there. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? There's more cranes in the sky and more people playing down on Broadway. So I'm sure it was very different for you to come back and kind of try to figure out who you were. But I know that you got to kind of write, you talked about Keith at the top of the conversation, but you got to write kind of the song that kind of blew open the doors for this project, Wild and Tame with Keith, and then Ray Willie Hubbard. So talk to me about that writer's room. Was that like, you had to like calm yourself down, like take the fanboy out of it?
Well, basically, just to give you my wife would always tell me, hurry up, your story's getting too long, but I'm trying to break it down and give you the long story short. But I had met Keith through my manager, Nick Hartley, because Keith was making a record on Randy Houser called Magnolia at the time. And I met Keith, and Keith and I was like, man, can we make a record together? And he was like, sure, why not? And so I would go to his house, and at the time he was still smoking, I was still smoking. So we would go smoke cigarettes and drink Coors Light or whatever it was at the time. And I think long after, he was well sober for a long, long time, and we wouldn't get hammered drunk, but we would sit around and talk about our favorite music. And he started sending me songs. I started sending him songs. In the meantime, I was going down to Texas quite a bit, just kind of getting away and getting my head clear. And I met Ray Wiley Hubbard at a Christmas party for my then record label, Broken Bow. And so Ray and I kind of met, and he was like, "Why don't you come down to Texas and let's write something sometime?" So I went down there and we wrote a song, and I got his number and I was like, "Hey, I've got to write with Keith Gaddis coming up. I know you love Keith, and I know Keith loves you. Let's get in the room and write something." So he was flying out that day, and we went over to Keith's house in Nashville at the time. We got to the studio in the tracking room at his house, and we sat down. And I'd had the title Wild and Tame. I'm a little more wild than tame, but Ray was like, he was like playing this crazy funky guitar thing, and just I tried to get him on this project and I couldn't get him because he was incredibly busy, but he was doing this murmuring and this low, like drunken, high sounding, like just making these weird sounds. And so when I turned the demo in or the work tape, everybody's like, "What the hell is this?" Because you can hear him in the background, just like
Is there a dying
whatever.
cat on this demo? Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. So the song sat for a long time, and somebody asked me for a TV pitch for Yellowstone, and I was like, "Oh, this Wild and Tame song is kind of cool. I don't really have a demo for it. Let me re-demo this thing." And so I did, and then I was like, "Well, I don't want to pitch this. I'd rather just cut it myself," and then that became part of the record. So it was kind of nutty.
I love it. That's such a wonderful story. So please don't let your wife tell you to ever shorten your
Yeah,
stories, because that was
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah. Uh,
But I didn't realize that you really were kind of the engineer and the producer behind this as well. Why was it so important for you to get, this one, Ashland City, sonically right? Because I feel like we're going to see sonic progression through the five as well. So you kind of talked to me about getting the sonics of this EP, just spot
um,
on.
I mean, two people really that did that to me. One was Jay Joyce, and the second was John Randall. Some years later, but a lot of people don't really. I used to write. I say this, and people are always like, "Wait, what? You wrote with him?" Jay Joyce and I used to write a little bit, and Jay, of course, I mean Eric Church and
Yeah.
everything else. Patty Griffin, Flamin' Red, one of my favorite records of all time. All those John Hyatt records. I would go write with Jay, and I was actually there, and we were talking about making a record together, and then just things at the label didn't quite work out, and money, and so he said, "Man, I know you're always talking about making records and producing records, and that's what you want to do later." He's like, "You should just take a stab at it and see what happens, because I don't think it's going to work out with us and your label, and you need to leave there." And he's really who kind of enticed me to try to get out of a record deal. And so long story short, that was in the back of my brain for a long time. And then John Randall, he always used to say, he would say, like, "Man, I'll always be like your buddy and your good friend, but I can just be a wingman too. Like, you don't have to hire me to make a record. Like, I feel like you already know what to do."
Yeah.
And he said, "I really just, if you want to do it, just do it." And so I called my manager and was like, "Look, John's got a lot going on between Parker and
Yeah.
all the great records he's got, and they're up here, and I'm kind of somewhere down here." And you notice that keeps getting longer. But
Yeah.
so John and I were in the process of making another project that just kind of went away, and he got busy. And so I dove in and started. And I've always loved the engineering side of it. I mean, I've always cut guitars from home and vocals from home and stuff for other people's projects or whatever, but I've never really just done a project myself. And obviously, great engineer Casey Wood, who's a dear friend of mine, has mixed a lot of my projects, not all of them. And he, mixed everything, but it was just a kind of a trial and error. Like, I want to see how far I can push it. And so this was one of the first that I had done the majority of work myself.
Oh my gosh. Well, talk about like a sense of pride, really kind of doing this from A to Z. You should look up, and this reminds me, there's this little kid, I think he was just on like CBS Sunday mornings or something. He's 6 years old and is a sound engineer and is starting to engineer his own stuff. So maybe
Yeah.
you could bring him on board.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
other project.
Well, and it's crazy because, I read a lot of the liner notes and stuff in records, and I'm not trying to boast on myself, but I see a lot of projects where it says, "Oh, this artist produced this project," and then you start figuring out it's like, well, they had a great band, they had a great engineer and a great assistant engineer. What did they really do? And no, like I wanted to take it home, play the majority of the instruments, do most of the things, and then just see what came of it. And that's, I mean, that's kind of how I just always figured if you could take something as far as you could on your own, why not try it? Because you always hear people saying, "Man, my home demo was cooler than the record," or "This was cooler than," and I always caught myself in that scenario. And I thought, well, this time I'll just keep pushing and see what comes of it.
I love it. So normally at this point of the interview, I'm like, what goals do you have for yourself this year? Well, I think we already have your 2024 mapped out really well.
Yeah.
So instead of asking you that, I'm going to ask you, what are you most excited for with these EPs and what can we expect in the latter half here of 2024?
I feel like some days I kind of feel like, I'm kind of diving in right now. Like I'm not thinking about these EPs anymore. I mean, I'm thinking about it now. I got to play them out live. Oh crap! I got to learn all these songs again.
That was my other
But I'm kind of like, what's next? Because now that I'm in this momentum of putting out music all the time, I'm more in depth to try to find what is next. Like I can't think about this. I got to think about the next thing. And I know some people say, well, that's not healthy. You need to live in the moment. And it's like, yeah, I do, but I just I think I'm more excited about the continuation of music and feeling inspired because inspiration only comes, and I don't know that this is everybody, but for me, it comes in spurts. And while the spurt's hot, it's like I need to kind of get on that fire and try to, bake the potato. It's like because it does go cold for me, and I do get tired. So and I just I feel like for me, it's just trying to keep my wheels rolling. I mean, I'm not old by any means, but I feel like while I've still got the passion and the drive and that intensity of the inspiration is there, it's like I just want to keep doing that. And I try not to get too caught up in what's current because as there's a lot of debacle and is this record country music or is this or is this, I don't care about that anymore. It's like I just want to make great music, and if it moves somebody, great, and if it doesn't, well, we'll try to make another one that does.
You're listening to